Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Tonight, I'll bring you the next part of Lie Too Deep and James, a story of love, faith, and resilience. You probably remember how the previous episode ended. The agricultural warehouse of DJ Agriculture was suddenly engulfed in flames, the night torn open by a sea of red and smoke. The fire rose like a furious beast, roaring against the quiet countryside sky. Thick, black smoke twisted upward, smothering the stars. Inside, chaos reigned. Workers shouted, water hoses tangled, alarms screamed into the darkness. James arrived breathless, his white shirt streaked with ash and fear. The scene was unreal, his life's work crumbling under orange light. It took the firefighters hours to tame the blaze. When it was finally over, the warehouse stood in silence, half burned, half surviving. The cost was enormous, not just in goods, but in spirit. Everyone knew this was no accident. When dawn came, it brought no peace. A thin veil of mist clung to the charred tin roof. Dew mixed with soot, dripping down like dark tears. The air carried the heavy scent of burnt plastic, wet earth, and old smoke. It clung to the skin, the kind of smell that lingers in memory long after it's gone. Police cars stood at the gate, their flashing lights dim under the pale sun. Investigators in worn boots trudged through the mud, cameras clicking as they documented the wreckage, every blackened wall, every warped beam. James and Diep stood silently near the one row of storage rooms that the fire had spared. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Every piece of debris, every pile of ashes spoke for itself. Each charred crate they watched being carried out wasn't just a box of produce, it was a chapter of their journey, gone in smoke. The reports were written neatly, line by line, by emotionless officers. But to James, each stroke of the pen felt heavy, like a hammer striking the remnants of his heart. By afternoon, the sky turned the color of dull metal. Clouds hung low and restless. Inside the police station, James sat quietly in a gray-walled room. A rusty fan groaned above him. A half-empty cup of tea sat cold beside a stack of files. The door opened with a creak. Two officers entered, escorting a man, thin, trembling, his hair matted, his face hollow. His hands shook as he sat across from James. The stench of gasoline and liquor filled the air. This, the officer began flatly, is the suspect. He's confessed, someone hired him to set the fire. James lifted his head. His gaze met the man's, not in fury, but in disbelief. This frail, broken figure was the one who had destroyed everything? There was no hatred in his eyes, only exhaustion, the kind born from nights without sleep and dreams burned to cinders. The man's voice trembled. I didn't mean to. They paid me. Said it was just to scare him. I didn't think it would really burn. The room fell silent. Only the ceiling fan creaked, slicing through the air like a slow clock counting down to truth. The man behind the fire, who hired you? James asked quietly. His voice was low, steady, too calm to be calm. For a moment, the man said nothing. His fingers scratched against the wooden table. The seconds stretched painfully long. Then, almost in a whisper, he answered, He used to work for your father. Back at the old company, even the investigator looked up, brows furrowing before flipping through his notes. He was a warehouse manager, the officer explained. Fired years ago for falsifying records and stealing goods. After that, he disappeared. Survived on odd jobs. Always bitter. When he heard you left the old company to start your own, he mocked you. Said you wouldn't last without your father's money. James didn't move. When DJ Agriculture started to grow, the officer continued, he couldn't stand it. So he paid this man to burn it. Out of revenge. The words cut deep. James could still picture him, the man who had once smiled, slapped his shoulder, and called him, young boss. The man who had wished him luck the day he left to chase his dream, and now, that same man had set fire to it all. James closed his eyes. He felt no anger, only a quiet ache, a sadness too deep for tears. Because the cruelest thing about betrayal isn't the loss. It's realizing that someone who once shared your dream had chosen to destroy it. When the investigation ended, the arsonist was led away in handcuffs. The clink of metal echoed down the narrow corridor. The case was closed, but in James's heart, the wound was still open. Outside, the rain had stopped. The air smelled clean again. Deep stood waiting by the gate with an umbrella, her hair damp, her eyes soft. So, it's over now? She asked. James nodded. His voice cracked slightly as he whispered, it's over. And for the first time in days, he smiled, a small, fragile smile that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. They walked away together, hand in hand, their footsteps soft against the wet pavement. Behind them, the gray building of the police station faded into the distance, and ahead lay only the promise of quiet days. Days turned into weeks. The warehouse was repaired, the walls scrubbed, the floor repainted, the machines restored. The smell of smoke was replaced by something gentler, the mingled sweetness of ripe fruit, soil, and sunshine. James spent his mornings checking on shipments. Deep watered the garden, her conical hat tilted under the morning light. In the afternoons, they worked side by side, repainting signs, rebuilding fences, sowing new seeds in the backyard. Each small act was a quiet declaration. We are still here. One morning, the grapefruit trees bloomed again. Tiny white flowers swayed gently in the breeze, their fragrance carrying across the yard like a whisper of hope. Diep paused to breathe it in, her lips curving into a soft smile. Their daughter, little Mi, ran around with her tiny basket, laughing as she tried to collect fallen petals. Her laughter filled the air like music, washing away the last echoes of fear. That sound, so pure, so alive, was worth more than any contract, any fortune. When winter came, the markets filled with color. Diep wrapped scarves around her daughter, her fingers careful and warm. "Do you like it?" she asked. Little Mi nodded, her cheeks rosy. James stood nearby, watching them with quiet pride. The cold wind brushed against their faces, but he smiled softly and said, "As long as we have each other, no cold can touch us." Diep blinked, her eyes glistening under the streetlight. The storms, the loss, the tears, all of it felt distant now, like another lifetime. Because in this small moment, under the winter sky, beside her husband and daughter, she realized they had already won. Not through money or success, but through surviving, loving, and never letting go. At the gate of DJ Agriculture, the new sign gleamed under the fading sunlight, clean, bold, and unbroken. James looked at it for a long while. Then he reached for Diep's hand and little Mi's tiny fingers. The three of them stood together in the quiet, the scent of grapefruit blossoms drifting softly through the air. And for the first time in a long time, James didn't feel the weight of the past, only gratitude. Because even after the fire, something still remained: love, faith, and the courage to begin again.